stop sharing. So that was the video presentation of it. And then let me share the actual.
So, your
Yeah,
okay. I'm saying your sound is a bit lower now. Not sure what happened.
my sound. Okay, let's go see. It's actually quite loud. Can you hear me now?
I can now. Yeah.
Okay. I wonder why. Did you? And then the video one.
The video was playing all right. It's just that now when you shared the screen, your sound went a bit low.
Oh, okay. Um, Probably it's a setting thing. Hmm. Let's see. Okay, probably it's a setting thing, and I am not sure.
Okay, but I can hear you.
Okay, cool. All right. From that video, just obviously it's an animation of the
Looks
design.
amazing.
Yeah. So we based our design on 5 elements that we had to look into, and that was around aesthetics, the culture, spirituality, the material, and also sustainability in terms of immaterial or, let's say, building process, basically.
Mm.
Yeah. And then aesthetics, as we had our previous conversation, you mentioned into of beadwork, about how
Yeah.
beadwork has an influence on our culture and also in terms of patterns. Um, well, that and obviously no ornaments in terms of where we showcase our patterns. And they also have a symbolic factor. So whatever pattern that is created, especially like if you look at places, I like the fact that you touched on Nigeria, because more now patterns that they create in images they are that they do they symbolic, so there's always like a meaning behind it. But I would say for us the biggest thing is mainly colors and shapes in relation to, let's say, amaXhosa. So yeah, um, that was like the first outlook in terms of the aesthetics, and then obviously looking at things like imachado, when new birth is there, and also for burial, there's always like some form of resemblance where it comes like for, especially like with beadwork, or anything the traditional occasions, what's worn and all that stuff. But I guess I'm explaining this to someone who's aware, but it's also good as we're learning from each other. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. And then um, after that, I took different elements and ornamentation just to pick up what will inspire the design. I don't know if you're familiar with Ulatuma. Surely you should know him, Makosa.
Yeah.
So
That's a
with him,
superhero.
yes, with him, I touched on like mainly for the interior space. This is the type of patterns somebody will use on the carpet rugs or the flooring, or maybe the different types of tiles that will be done on the interior. And then the furniture as well. Just looking at the furniture is just going to be mainly patterned influence. But I didn't get to the point where I did my interior. That's something I'm having to work on. But yeah, because of time frame, I was like, just work on the outside as much as you can. So yeah. And then cultural inspired architectural forms and shapes. Obviously, we spoke about them. Now, yeah, I like the fact that your new range is touching on that. So we can see that there's predominantly 3 types of shapes that we can pick up. Obviously, the traditional being the circle, the hexagon, the octagon is more of the modernized, and the ones that have evolved in terms of look here on the belt. And also, just what's interesting is even on the bottom edging of ironti. The reason why normally you see a band a black, because at home they'll normally paint the bottom part black. It's because of like flooding.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's because of Amanzi. And I was like, oh wow, okay, that was actually smart.
Brilliant.
Yes. So it's to help Angel with
That's
Amanzi.
the thing. Sorry to cut you.
Yeah.
The thing is, there's nothing we don't know. I feel like we know everything. It's just that we think we don't know.
And which means architecture within us, I would call it like a natural born thing, because it's not like I had to sit eskolweni and go and study that. Somebody discovered it and was like, no man, a certain color will prevent something, like the logic behind that is amazing as well. So
Yeah.
yeah. So you always gonna find. Now I was like, because even at home recently we just did Irondi, and I was like, why are we painting it black? Because most of the houses have this black band. Like, what is it for? So there's a significance behind it, actually. So yeah, and then it's interesting how I also showed like different forms and shapes, obviously relating to Ingunu culture, but some lecturer was like, okay, as a Xhosa person, can't we just make you Ngunu and you're like Zulu people, like Ndebele people? I'm like, no, 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 you can't. We are not the same. There's a huge. I'm like, you can't just come to a Xhosa person and say hi Ngunu. No, like there's a huge difference. So about Inguni, it's like a classification, and then under that classification, we break down. Even as Xhosa, I still break down because umntwana goes by ulihlubi, ulimpondo, mapata. So there's a lot that's involved. I'm like, our culture spectrum is quite wide. So it's like, oh, okay, wow, I was not aware of that. I'm like, yep. So don't read your small thing. Don't read some thin book and say, oh, all South Africans are Goonies. No. So yeah, so we're like looking at the different shapes, like the dome shape. Normally, as you would find, obviously, these, and then Kwandebele, they're the ones who decided to go square. So they went out of the dome shape and then did the pattern as well. So yeah, and then looking at the modern version or the modern interpretation. In modern interpretation, obviously, you see architecturally, if you go to your international places, you see as much as it's a dome influence, but how they retrofitted a bit of a westernization touch to it. And then obviously lapa, we all used to the setup, but it's still using traditional material. And then this Rondavel, this is the one that we just recently built at home. So on the literally we went very modern on it. I won't say yeah, we did a very traditional look onto it. So for me, I was just like, I want to break away from the norm. I want to bring upon something refreshing, whereby when people are gonna pass by, but wow, okay, it can still fit with context. This is Lalin. However, I'm still respecting its shape in terms of taking corner, but an 8 corner is a new version of it because it also speaks in terms of time. Because if Umdanga Ibona, as you're saying now, is still the one that was done with mad, that is speaking its time, as much as it may have depleted or whatever the case may be. The influence also from the roof, where you're like, oh, okay, a pattern has derived here. I can pick up something from it. So even with this, for me, I was like, speaking of its time, it's going to be a reflection of to the near future, maybe let's say 20, 50 years from now, it's going to speak a different language to another group of people. So yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Anything
Sorry, just before you.
Yeah.
On the, why did you make the, you see the white part on the roundabout?
Yeah.
On the door, yeah. Is there significance?
Okay, there's no significance per se. like going back to the whole black band. I was
Yeah.
looking at it mainly, let's say, from an architectural point of view, how to define openings. So it was just mainly a definition of openings. But then I feel as though also it could be some framing element to the house as well. Because if we had left it, let's say, blank with no color or no definition, it would have just been, I don't know, it wouldn't have stood out the way it appears now. And just to add on to it, I think if Kambi Umdu did patterns, like as much as it's white, but see include a certain pattern that represents something, let's say, related to openings or headway, it's opening a way. Then it could have been given much more significance, I think. So that's
Yeah.
something I can still add on.
Because I'm asking,
Mm,
yeah, I'm asking because I was reading this paper that touched
okay.
on that. There's this Rondaville that had right on the opening, it
Mm,
was painted like that. That white was going through like the door,
yes.
and the idea was that that's where, can't really remember, but it was like a portal. It's like it had something to do with ancestors. They should see the way. Yeah, but I remember just seeing that. So
Okay.
your lines, they remember that, or maybe that's how you guys communicate. That's ancestors need to see that, okay, this is the way we need to get in this home.
Yes.
It was something along those lines, a portal getting
Okay.
out and going in.
Mm. Okay. I mean, maybe intuitively, Nakona, because it's an intuition thing that one could do,
Mm.
but then it could also relate to ancestors. Because when you design, sometimes they communicate with you in weird ways, and you just
Nah, exactly.
so
You're just like, yo, I was just making this.
you're just like, nah, man, I'm painting it white. Like, I think white will do. And for them, that's their connection with us to say, by the way, this is how we're going to enter, or this is how we're going to share
And
light.
this is to get Bantuin.
Exactly, exactly. So that's what we
Like,
feel.
as far as I did up, but like
Yes,
yeah,
yeah.
disturb
So
you.
yeah, so I mean, we both have the same sentiment in terms of, I mean, ideas. Sometimes you think, where do they come from? What are they influenced by? Yeah, well, and half of
Mm,
the time they are brewed. We subconscious, yeah, too. You don't like you could have seen
mm,
an item, clamby or travelisha somewhere, and you're like, oh, that's intriguing, that building, or hey, la pattern, or or this guy was wearing this jacket. But then
mm.
you find yourself when you're designing and actually in the process of getting your actual design, it comes in, and now you wonder about where did I get this inspiration from? But you don't know like when or where, but it comes into your design somehow. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's the beauty about being creative. Okay.
totally agree.
Yeah. So okay, then touching on the spiritual sense, I like the fact that you brought it up on the previous one. Um, let's say cultural Dala in terms of how a homestead was set up. You'd normally find like Isbaya being in the middle of the like the houses. So obviously, this is not really in relation to Amakosa, but I'm acknowledging it in terms of just as an African culture setup. Like normally, Isbaya, where do you keep your animals? It's either they at the back of the household or in the middle, you know. So I like
Mm,
the middle, the center part, because it centralizes the movement. Number one. Number two, it's creating like some form of core, like, and again, spirituality is all about, let's say, that balance, finding the more of like being centered, being balanced. So even with inkomo zakho, that's your wealth, that you're storing your money or your riches in a centralized position. As much can be happening around it, but unala core yakho yaziyo uba it's consistent, it's stable, it's living, and it's breeding. Yeah, bo? And again, it's a sacred space. Not anyone just enters that space where you find only males have access to it. Women are only allowed to a certain point. Yeah. So there's a whole like degree also about okay, who's got access, who doesn't have access. Omdala, like
How do you feel about that?
well, around that, okay, at first, at first it was a bit, I'd be like, oh my gosh, there's so much discrimination, you know. But then you learn with time that you need to actually respect culture as well. It's a form of respecting culture because it's all about connectivity. A woman and a man, the way they connect to, let's say, on a spiritual aspect, are fun, number one. And number two, you find that amadoda, even communication, they've got a different way of communicating on men to men compared to women to men. So with time and maturity on my side, it took me time to understand it, but then I was like, oh, okay, cool. I clearly kona level way.
My
I was like, okay, Z levels, clear way.
word. Like for any feminist.
Yeah?
So to
No. Like, thing is,
I feminist.
no, my man, even a feminist, now I'm confused because ning. 1 minute, was the feminist? Next minute, you're like, yeah, now you're being a woman, man. You have to know your position. Like, so
Oh
actually,
my
so
god.
the whole thing of feminism, I don't want to tap onto it because, yeah, it gets tricky along the way. And now I'm looking at it from a traditional aspect.
Okay.
From a traditional aspect to say, also it's a hierarchy thing. The thing for you to receive, let's say, written knowledge or information from your grandmother, she's her wisdom is on another level compared to yours. Yeah, bon? So it's all of that, and also like for me, it's a great way to pass on tradition or to keep that lineage going because Isbaya Isbaya is a representation of wealth, and connecting to that spiritually. It didn't mean that Untu had to have emote or had to have show off with materialistic items, but because of a livestock yako, that that connects to us when it comes to traditional ceremonies. When you do your ceremony, I mean, Inkomo is involved, Ikusha is involved, Ipokwe is involved. They represent something to connect with ancestors as well. So, I mean, and I mean, just that design layout has a spiritual connection already. So, yeah. Okay. I don't know what happened. Sharing is paused. I don't know why it did that, but hey, that's a bit odd. Okay. I don't know. It just turned off my screen. That is so odd. Okay, let me
I
just
think
turn
it's
off.
been.
Or does it give me a time for sharing a screen? Because that's new.
Now I could still see the thingy on
Okay, can you see it now?
your on your side.
Okay.
I think it's
Can you see it? Well,
yes.
fine. Okay, and then looking at it from spirituality, moving into everything that I was presenting, I moved from tradition to modern. So it's like a contrast all the time. And then getting to modern, obviously, when you look at your lodges, people want to have fireplaces, bonfire, it's the in thing, So a circle is always like a symbol of togetherness, congregating, like tying people. So that's where I was like, oh, okay, I like this circle element. It's still there, but the way it's also played around, it's also evolved in a sense of but it's more open, it's not enclosed, it's closer to the ground. So there's actually so much interpretation that can be given. And then moving on to material. Material, literally, you and I, we're on the same scope. Looking at the material as well, going back to your thatch, mud brick, timber poles, and interestingly, all
Mm.
material is durable and easily renewable. So it's from nature. Cost wise, you don't have to spend much. So that's why when you said lamtu to rework or refurbish la ronti, it's gonna cost them quite a lot. Yeah, I'm a bit like, okay.
Yeah, like in terms of, well, that's what they told me
Mm,
because the grass is not there. So in terms of the lot with Kubo, be paying to go to I don't know, in Port St. John's to get the grass is more expensive. So
okay.
they wouldn't necessarily pay to, because the grass around the area is not growing.
No, okay, fair enough. Ne? I get
Maybe
that.
expensive is relative.
Hey?
I'm saying expensive APA was relative. Maybe he's not willing to spend 2 grand to transport in kodwa wayekade ikha apha
Okay.
ezigadini dala.
That okay, no, that's what I'm saying. Like, look, you mentioned then climate change has an influence, which it does.
Yeah.
Now you look at your environment and landscape, but certain, let's say, natural building materials are not growing the same way they used to. But then
Yeah.
also, I say, there's also alternative material. Like you can look at a straw. You can look at like I'm still trying to think what could be closest to a thatch, instead of inga, but you still have the same effect as a thatch as well.
Mm.
So I mean, Nati, it's kind of like making us think out the box and push our way of rebuilding or preserving what was built. Yeah, well, and it's interesting, but also like a foundations are mainly done from amake. So it's that amake default you'll find everywhere. There's no thing of saying no, amake aweko. Trust me, usezilalini ezitabeni. But again,
Yeah.
the hardcore labor behind that and the process will be quite intense, I would say. But looking at for everything in terms of for me, maintenance, durability are the essence of a design. So once you can strike the balance between those two, then you're looking at something that's sustainable. So yeah. And then looking at the modern version, you're like, okay, wow. It can be beautified as well, because we are so used to just and then
Mm.
another mindset shift that happened to me was how do we view Ironti as a design, and I can actually call it a design because it takes one. It actually begins with the individual to say a Rondavel is a design, right? Because we are so used to
Yeah.
just, oh, okay, no, Ironti, like, no, we don't value it as like architecture. But you realize, like, no, man, someone sat and thought about this, and there's a functionality going on. And Nyani, we the ones who have to appreciate it first before the whole entire world actually sees it,
Mm.
you know? So for me, like looking at these images, I was like, okay, clearly like this one at the bottom, as much as they took the steel, incorporated it with thatch. Here there's a lot of stone with a bit of straw, timber pole. So it says a lot about immaterial, it's how you play with it. And also how you enhance that aesthetic to say, yes, you might think that it's cheap, but actually it's so sustainable to a point that the beauty that you can derive from it, that's the interesting part about how do you portray it. So yeah, and then looking at it in a sustainable way. Also, like with Ironti, it's also interesting how it's in a triangle shape as much as it's round. And also like looking at umlilo, because you think to yourself, I've got a grass, it could burn any minute. But in
Yeah.
What one is Xhosa? Oh gosh, there's my Xhosa running away. Don't
Eh, yeah, no, nam, the limel.
but you get what I was like? Again, like that's the first word that I need. But clients it's actually
So I worked on your god.
it's not a Konya, is I forgot it. I just forgot it, damn it. So yona, like in ne? It's interesting how by default, looking at let's say comparing winter and summer, ne? And for example, also xa ifaka ilento, xa ifake i-cow dung, njena busitsho in that household, that actually makes the house warm. It absorbs heat. So it's really amazing about how, like, it's natural resources, but how someone took it and turned it around to say, okay, we may not have a heater, however, the house itself will generate its own heat, you know? And for me, it's amazing that just using your sun, like, okay, Ilana, if I'll make it face that direction, I know, but in summer, I'm getting maximum sun on this edge. In winter, I'm getting maximum shade, or whatever the case is. So it's all those elements. And for us, we are then taught to school in as passive design. Someone will go, okay, no, but that's passive warming and cooling. But then I sit and I'm like, oh, but wait, my grandmother knew that before she was told it's passive cooling or warming, you know? Like, yeah, intuitively she was designing already with the orientation, the weather in mind for her to have placed Ironjake in a certain place at home. So it's all of those things, which I find, I wouldn't really say they're innovative, but they are elements where we need to work with the environment or our climate to say, for me to design to my maximum sustainability aspect, what factors am I including in my building? Because e building, in essence, is an object. You are taking this object, you are disturbing the ecosystem, number one, and your environment. So, what sensitivity am I allowing or placing and putting in place to respect the environment? Yeah. So that's one aspect, and then obviously looking at how nowadays it's like made to look good, and going back to the bonfire feel and how it thatch as well. I like the shadowing, like how it brings off that shade as much as there's light coming through. Also with Laronti, with the patterns around the windows. So in this case, they decided to give it a bit of detail. And then okay, this is a very interesting rendezvous or heating space. How an opening has been created. I'm not sure what material has been used though. I would like to know that. But yeah. And then that was it for CPGI Africa, representing Xhosa architecture. So yeah.
Reroute cultural identity, African centered design, vernacular design, Ubuntu too. Black design matters. Decolonize the curriculum. Yes, girl. Africa defines architecture. Creators are for Africa.
Yeah.
Nah, man, this is awesome, dude.
So
this
yeah.
is this is brilliant.
So yeah, so
we need more.
Yeah.
Sorry. Eh? Oh no, I was just saying, yeah, we need more people like us.
Definitely.
For the generation to come.
No, most definitely.
People that are gonna preserve or try.
I mean, it's a movement where I think Abantu they more conscious about it now, and it's something that you like. You really have to like. There's a lot of self investing in this thing. I won't say if you want to get rich, you'll be instantly rich from it, because you are literally changing the narrative to say